Okay. Well, first of all, we just want to give you just kind of a brief introduction of Todd and myself and how we kind of came to being crazy and wanting to stand up here and share our story. Todd and I were married for 14 years, and in our marriage we had two boys, 14-year-old. He's now 14 and 11. We in the 14th year of our marriage, we were really going through a rocky time. We were what we would say believers, but not followers. We were sort of in and out of church. I would go, he wouldn't go, he would go, I wouldn't go. Sometimes we went together. So it was really kind of this wishy-washy relationship. But because we were believers and not really followers, when the times got the toughest, it made it really easy for us to just allow divorce to come into our life. And we did get divorced 2 years ago.
Ugly D word. Yeah,
that was, the ugly D word.
And it's awful, yeah. It was an awful time in our life.
Yeah, it was.
But that was probably the lowest part of my life, going through divorce. Number one, I didn't think it would happen to me. And number two, I didn't think it would happen to me.
Yeah.
And it did. It happened. And it was wow. It brought me to my knees, and it was a tough time for me. But
one of the things that Todd and I realized is that when you're down at your lowest of lows, and when you're on your knees, that's when God really has your attention. And if you were at the marriage retreat, you'll hear this, but it's so true, and I have to say it over and over. When we were separate, or when we were divorced, God really took a 2x4 upside both of our heads and knocked us out and said, hey, you guys belong together, you should be together. And it was at that point that we really just stopped thinking about ourselves, and we really started thinking about what was really where we were supposed to be. And we did realize that we were soulmates. And so we started working our way back together. Part of that journey was to find a church that we could both, where we both felt like we could serve. And so we found Canyon View. And at the time, Canyon View was only offering one course, and that was for premarital couples or serious couples, and that was relationship builders. And sorry, Teresa, I know I do this to you every time, but Teresa was our group leader, and Teresa was so fantastic. She was exactly what we needed. And this is, all about God's timing, because the relationship builders class started exactly when we needed it. Teresa was there, and she was exactly what she needed, because she never lets you get away with anything. She is so awesome. So we started working our way back together, and we were remarried a year ago last August.
Yay. It's been awesome. It's been a better ride this time. Awesome ride. And the powerful thing that we didn't have in our relationship or even in our marriage was having God at the center. And that is so important. Guys, if you don't have God in your life or in your marriage, you will take these paths. And luckily for us, ours came back together. And that's I think that's why we're here, to be honest with you. We've got a message to share, and we're going to, hopefully you guys don't take that same road we did.
I'll tell you, I would never advocate divorce, but even if you're in a relationship where you feel like, gosh, things aren't really going that great right now, or you may have been in a situation in your marriage. I mean, marriage is just a natural ebb and flow, and things kind of go up and they go down. But as long as you have the possibility of divorce in your life, it's always going to just sit there and nag at you. And that's exactly... that's what the enemy wants. The enemy does everything he can to get you together. He creates all this attraction and all this lovey feelings. And then once you're together, he does everything he can to get you apart. So, you really just have to, if you don't have God there protecting you, it can be really detrimental.
It gets very dangerous, that's true. So I'm going to read you a little story about a couple. And this couple, they argued throughout their whole married life. There seemed to be no subject on which they agreed. And they argued and argued and argued. So to everyone's amazement, they reached their 50th wedding anniversary. So their children decided to give them a visit to a top consultant psychiatrist as a golden wedding present. Yeah, that's kind of cool, huh? That's probably what we'll get.
Yeah.
The couple couldn't agree whether or not to accept it. They argued about when to go. They argued about how often to get there. And they were still arguing as they walked in. So the psychiatrist asked them one question. They started arguing. After a long time, the psychiatrist said, "Stop. I'm going to do something I've never done before in my life." He walked around his desk, and I get this, he walked around his desk, took the little old lady in his arms, and kissed her right on the lips.
I don't get a kiss?
You're not a little old lady. Then he said to the husband, he said, "Sir, now that is what this woman needs 3 times every week." So the old guy kind of, "Well, all right. Okay, Doc, if that's what you'll say, I'll bring her here on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays." So disagreement is inevitable for every marriage. We're going to give you 4 reasons why that's so. And the first thing is we're different. We perceive things differently. We come into marriage with different backgrounds, different desires, different priorities, different personalities, and so on. So we're just different.
That's true. The other thing is that we're all pretty self-centered. I mean, we're just naturally self-centered people. We're always trying to find ways, how can what about my opinions, or what about my rights? One woman who had been married for 6 months said, "I was more surprised by what I discovered about myself than what I discovered about my husband. It was like having a mirror held to my face, and I saw how selfish I really am." And I can really relate to that because as Todd and I started to work our way back to each other, one of the things that I really discovered about myself is how arrogant I really was about our relationship. I was always thinking, why isn't he doing this for me? And why isn't he meeting this need? And he should do this, and he should do that. And I want a spiritual leader, and I want a man who helps me clean the house, and I want a man who opens the door. Instead of thinking, what can I do to really build this man up? What can I really do to make him feel special? What can I do? So I was really, definitely arrogant in our relationship, and I really realized that. And I'll tell you what, God has a real special way of knocking you down when he thinks that you need to be knocked down a few. And I'm sure I'm at least 3 inches shorter than I was before, at least. A lot of times we think it's easier to do things alone because we think we can do it better, but that can be really frustrating for someone else. It's kind of like when you're going through when you're doing a 3-legged race, and if they just kind of pick a group of people and they say, okay, you 2 do it, and you 2, and you 2, and you don't really know that person, and you're trying to do a 3-legged race with that person, you're not really at the same stride, you don't really know each other, maybe your legs are different lengths, or your feet, or something like that.
Yeah, and early in our marriage, I think that's how we were. I think we got our legs ready to go, and there was a couple times we could actually move in unison. But then there was times where fumble, trip. Right.
So, the important part is you just have to practice and practice and practice. And once, you get that practicing down, you can really get in stride with each other, and you can really win that race. It's a bit like, marriage is just like a bit like doing a 3-legged race. Like I said, we are naturally self-centered, but we have the choice and the ability to really take that self-centeredness and reflect those feelings outward to each other.
And another area that we seem to fail at as couples is we fail to handle anger properly. And I'm not saying that anger is right or anger is wrong, but it's a God-given signal that there is something wrong when one of us shows anger. We may have been unjustly treated or hurt or offended in some way, but anger can be used wrongly in a number of ways. We want to take a look at 2 inappropriate ways of using anger, and it seems that half the population they've learned to control anger in one way, and another half controls it in the other way. And we're going to talk to you about 2 different types of personalities. And this is kind of cool.
Yeah, I love this one. So roughly half the population, when they become angry, they're more inclined to let you know it. We call those people rhinos.
Like a rhinoceros.
Because when a rhino is provoked, it will put his head down and charge at you. The reason why I say that is because I'm a rhino, big time. If I'm mad at you, there is no question you will know.
She's coming down, man. Here comes the head. Look out.
I don't run scared.
The other half of the population, when they're angry, they hide it. They become quiet and withdrawn, and they may sulk. We call them hedgehogs. So I'm like a hedgehog. A hedgehog, when threatened, curls up, sticks out its prickles to keep others at distance. And it's not that all hedgehogs do nothing with their anger. It's rather they show it in a different way. Other than like the rhino comes at you, I'm more like a hedgehog would be like, oh man, here she comes, you know.
But they'll stick their prickles out. Make no mistake about that.
If it's not that hedgehogs, you know, like I said, they
Or
don't.
rhinos.
Or rhinos.
They're not wrong.
They're not wrong.
Just different.
Just different. That's right. So, well, a lot of couples are made up into, like we said, a rhino or a hedgehog. And for myself, I'm a hedgehog. Candace is a rhino. So I'm just kind of curious, look around the room. Which one of you is a rhino, perhaps?
Yeah. Who's married to a rhino?
Ah.
Who's married to a hedgehog?
All right. Kind of
Right.
split it down there.
2 hedgehogs.
Well,
Did I see that? Maybe.
No, we split. We just asked, are you the rhino or the hedgehog?
Oh.
The other one goes the other way.
Okay.
They call those rhinehogs, dear.
We call that multiple personality disorder. Okay, whatever.
Gemini's, we're everything.
So we're going to give you a little story about kind of describing our rhinoisms and our hedgehogisms, and you kind of get a glimpse of how Candace and I are.
Yeah, this actually just happened last winter, and this is absolutely positively true. We are so full of stories. Full of something.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this story really happened. I'll tell you, my rhinoism was so in full force on this deal. What happened was, are we getting specific? We are.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Let's
get it all on the table tonight.
Yeah. Todd's family had come into town. They live out of town. His sister and their family came into town. And I want to say right off the bat, I love his family. I absolutely love his family. His family is just great. But there's, sometimes, as we'll talk about later in the in-laws, there can always be problems with in-laws, regardless of whether or not you love them or you don't. Sometimes there's a problem with favoritism, and I think it's just partly because they live away from grandparents and we live close to grandparents, and so sometimes feelings can get a little hurt. But they were coming into town. He has another sister who lives here, and they have snowmobiles. Well, his sister that lives in Phoenix, and I hate doing like Sister A, Sister B, but Sister A lives in Phoenix, and Sister B lives here.
Well, they'd love that.
Yeah. But we don't want to do names. Anyway, Sister A lives in Phoenix, and she came in, and Sister B invited her and her kids to go snowmobiling.
And
all fine and dandy.
All fine and dandy. But you got to remember, it was Christmas break, so our kids were...
Yeah, all the kids were out of school, so this is
Right.
Christmas break. Except for the fact that they didn't invite my kids to go. And my kids have never been invited to go. And I lost it. Because my kids' feelings were hurt. Now, if my kids wouldn't have said anything, I probably wouldn't have worried about it. But they were like, well, how come Sister A didn't take me snowmobiling, or Sister B or whatever? Why didn't she take us snowmobiling? She's never invited us to go. And why did cousin A, B, and C get to go and we didn't get to go?
I'm confused. I'm learning the alphabet
Yeah.
tonight. Okay, it's all good.
Sorry. But anyway, so my rhino. Do you know what your sister did?
Hedgehog. Whoa! Wait a minute. Prickles everywhere.
And I was so livid, and I really wanted Todd to go to his family and say something about it. I really wanted him to say, you really need to invite the kids. You really need to, not leave any of the kids out. And I'm sure some of you guys are sitting out there going, oh yeah, this has happened to us before. Maybe not, maybe you don't have a Sister A or a snowmobile, but basically it's the same situation. But I was really attacking Todd, and Todd came back to me, and he was kind of prickling back at me too.
Yeah, I didn't know what the big deal was. I mean, so they didn't go. There probably wasn't enough room in the car. No big deal. I mean, it's Christmas break. We're all going to get together and do something fun. It's no big deal to me. Well, it was a big deal to Candace. And again, I was kind of like backed in a corner, prickles were all out. But the thing was, Candace did want me to go say something, and I respect that and her feelings that she wanted me to say something to my family. And me being a little hedgehog, I was able to hedge my way over to the family without starting a huge uproar and having the rest of the Christmas vacation turn into a disaster. I said, boy, did you guys overlook the kids maybe? Oh, yeah, oh gosh, yeah,
Yeah. Well, the important thing is that after I had my explosion and he had his prickling, we kind of came together and we said, hey, you know what, here's the deal. We need to come up with a solution that both of us can be happy with. Obviously, Todd had to realize that regardless of what was going on with his family, I am his primary responsibility as his spouse, he is my primary responsibility. We have to make each other happy. And if something's really bothering me, even if it's not bothering him, Todd knew that, he had to really step up and do something. He had to really respect my feelings. And I didn't expect that he would go over and, cause a big family riff. All I really wanted is that it not to happen again. And
Basically,
so Todd
yeah.
did. I mean, he went to his family and said, hey, the next time you go, it would be really great if you could invite our kids. And it was fine. And, the next time something came up, they actually did invite us. So.
Candace just wanted to be validated. Her feelings needed to be validated. And, in the past, before we got all these, I call them tools that we have now to make our marriage work a lot smoother. In the past, I would have gotten really angry at Candace and said that she's acting like a child, whatever. I would have said some mean things and probably would have spent the rest of Christmas break by myself, in a snowbank somewhere, I'm sure.
But the other thing to keep in mind about the story that we just told you, we didn't do everything right. We didn't read a book and, honey, Hold on, okay. We know a lot of things we can read a lot of things, and we've taken a lot of classes, and we've got a lot of help from our accountability partners, but we don't always do things right. But the important thing is that we eventually get back to where we really need to be, and we really recenter ourselves, and sometimes we do it right, sometimes we don't. So, but that just goes to show you that, being in different places can sometimes cause conflict, so.
It's a fun story, huh?
Yeah.
There's more stories.
Yeah. This actually isn't our story, but we're going to share it anyway. This is an example of shows what happens when two people in a marriage are both hedgehogs. Yeah. Was there any two hedgehogs?
Any two hedgehogs? Right there? A couple of hedgehogs?
All right, this one's for you.
All right, here we go. Get the candle for those guys right there.
Paul and Carolyn had just been married for 6 years, and they always used to boast that they'd never had an argument. Friends did not believe it, but it was true. That is, it was true until Christmas Eve of last year. Neither of them can remember exactly how it started, except that it had something to do with Christmas tree lights, a roll of tape, but if the couple had not argued for 6 years, they made up for it in remarkable hours between 6 and 7 o'clock on Christmas Eve. As the argument intensified, hurts became tumbling out that lain hidden for years, the oldest being something that happened on the afternoon of their wedding.
Wow.
They didn't say a word to each other for 3 days, and she honestly thought their marriage could end. By the new year, they had begun to grunt at each other, and now they're fine, except that they argue every 2 months. They've decided it's much better, or it's much healthier to argue. So what kind of can happen with two hedgehogs is that they can really just kind of hide their feelings and hold it all in until there's an explosion, and then they're both prickling at each other. Problem with two rhinos is that they can constantly be fighting and never get anything done. So you just kind of have to be aware of who you're married to, what kind of personality they have, and just work together. The thing is there's no cookie cutter approach. Even if you have a rhino and a hedgehog or whatever, you just have to find what really works for you and try to set those rules before you fight.
There's rules in fighting?
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Oh, cool. All right. So both rhinos and the hedgehogs must learn to handle anger properly. Uncontrolled anger has terrible consequences. Rhino behavior leads to a husband or a wife living with the constant fear of an explosion, and hedgehog behavior leads to an erosion of intimacy as resentment builds up. Both are damaging and effective ways of reforming conflict. So which do you tend towards, a rhino or a hedgehog? If you're not certain, spend about 10 seconds consulting your spouse, and I bet you'll have a good idea.
And we already did that, so.
Yeah.
Okay. The fourth thing is that sometimes we think resolving conflict means that someone has to lose. And this is one of my favorite ones because this is something I really learned about us, too. I think we both really learned it. We try to surrender or try to force a surrender out of our spouse. It's like we have to win. In our case, when we first started fighting, I really wanted something. I really wanted him to go to his family, and he really wanted just for it to go away. But we really had to come to an agreement that we could both be happy with. If you dig in and you hold to your point of view without listening to your partner's thoughts or feelings, it will lead to a trench warfare. Sometimes we can end up expending our energy on defending our position rather than working on the solution together. And winning doesn't involve someone losing, because you have to remember that we're on the same side. I like to think of it as not compromising. I don't really like the word compromise, because compromise means that you have to give something up. And not that you shouldn't give something up for your spouse, but if you can really focus on a solution that you can both be happy with, instead of thinking right off the bat you have to give something up. Right. A lot of times you can really think, you can really just get through things a lot easier. You want to do that? Our little, is that later?
That's later.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks. My husband's keeping me on track tonight. So we're going to look at 4 principles on working together. The first is expressing our appreciation for one another. And this is one of Todd's favorites, because he is, if you remember from love languages, he is a words of affirmation.
I love this one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, right after physical touch.
Yeah, well, yeah, let's not get confused here.
So conflict causes us to tend to focus on each other's negative traits when teamwork involves encouraging each other. James Dobson, who is with Focus on the Family, did a survey to identify reasons for periods of depression in married women, 27 to 40, and he found that most of them had small children at home. They were asked to rate 10 possible reasons in the order of priority, and the majority of the women chose low self-esteem as the greatest difficulty in their lives. And this isn't something that's just for women. This is something that men suffer or have too. And men just may not be as expressive about that. So we need to really take each other into consideration. Mark Twain said, I can live for 2 months on a sincere compliment. And that is so true. You can't just hand out empty compliments. You really have to be sincere about what you're saying to each other. One of my favorite books, and I'm not sure if no, it's not over there. One of my favorite books, and it really just kind of helped me see a lot, was For Women Only by Shanti Feldman. If you haven't read that, I really suggest that you read that. And I know Todd's read For Men Only, and I haven't read that, although it's on the book thing to read. But
that and Candace can talk about For Women Only, but For Men Only, it's kind of like a guide to, like a car, for example, and you can. The carburetor's not working. Well, I can see why. Okay, now a little fine tuning here, and it's just a great book. It's just it's really cool, and
it does help him understand why I ask, why do I look bad in this, and he's going, ugh. Yeah, it's really good. Appreciation is the opposite of criticism, and it's really important to remember that when you're criticizing someone, you're not showing appreciation at all. When couples are going out, they must appreciate each other. In marriage, it's easy to focus on what irritates us, and we need to make a habit of focusing on what we like and admire about each other. And it has to be a daily thing. I mean, you can't just say, honey, I love you once. One husband said to us, I told my wife on our wedding day that I loved her and will let her know if the situation changed. It hasn't, but she keeps complaining. I don't tell her about my feelings.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you got to discipline, guys. You can't just show up to functions like this and say, okay, I'm fixed. I showed up to this, took the class, my marriage is saved. I'm going to be fine. Walk out the front door tonight and go, whoa.
Yeah, we're good for the next 10 years.
We're not going to have any conflict in our life. You got to work the principles, guys. I wish it was that easy, but
I'll tell you what, this class really helps keep Todd and I in line, because we're always having, we're always reading, and we're with our accountability partners. We've made such great friends, and they're the ones that really keep us going and make us always remember that, we're in this for each other, and
Yeah, that's right, absolutely. So now we're going to do a little exercise. So I think it's on page 36 of your manual. You guys want to turn to that. And it is showing appreciation. So I want you to write down 6 things that you appreciate about your spouse. Don't look at each other's yet. Write them down.